it's that time. It's the magic. It's 1 o'clock. And oh my goodness, we have a magnificent day planned for you for an hour. And before we start, I would truly like to thank each one of you for attending this very, very special Zoom to bring you up to date on NSDOA business. Let me tell you about the cookbook. Davina, if you have the cookbook, would you show it, please? Otherwise, I have the cookbook. And the cookbook will be available tomorrow on the website. So we cannot ever start a Zoom without Davina telling the membership numbers and the supplements. And then I'm going to ask our Chaplain National to say something, to give us a prayer. So Davina, numbers, please.
We have 1,254 amazing members, and we are honoring 1,285 supplemental ancestor farmers. It's really nice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Davina. Sandy Bassett is our Chaplain National. Sandy, please.
Thank you. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we ask thy blessing upon these devoted members of descendants of American farmers. We thank you, dear Lord, for all the opportunities we have in our life to show love, to have faith, to feel joy, and to support our fellow man. Dear Lord, please wrap your loving arms around all those in the Ukraine. Please protect them and give them strength in the months and days to come. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If you are not a member of NSDOAF, I know we've got some guests here. Would you just raise your electronic hand and let us see how many guests we have? It would just be fun to see. Let's see. We don't have anyone with a raised hand.
We do. Donna.
Oh, Donna
and Patricia.
And Patricia, it's nice to meet you both. Well, thank you so much for coming. You're going to love this Zoom. And as President National, I would like to invite you to join our society if and when you find the time. So Renee Hamilton is our NSDOAF ambassador. And she and I were chatting one day, and I asked her for some suggestions for Zooms. And she came up with this marvelous speaker. And we've done a couple of tests, and it is fascinating what she's going to say. So Renee, I'm going to turn it over to you, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay, good. Thumbs up usually works. I wanted to, before we go too far, I wanted to give you just, remember the Zoom etiquette, if you would please, to keep yourselves muted, just so that we don't hear dogs and things in the background or whatever. And if, as I go through today, if I see people that are not muted, don't be alarmed if you see me mute you, because we just want to make sure it remains nice and quiet for Shari when she presents. And if anyone has a problem in regards to how they're viewing their screens, you can unmute yourself and ask that question now, and I can show you, or at least talk you through how to set it up. There's several ways, and you may be more interested in setting yourself up today in the speaker mode so that your speaker's face would be seen, and then just the PowerPoint. But most of the time I leave mine in gallery so that I can see everyone. And then whenever someone is speaking, that their box is highlighted, so you can usually find out quickly who is speaking or has the noise actually in the background, so it tattles on us. But anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Shari and introduce her so that we can move into her PowerPoint today. But Shari has just recently, we've just had her move to Houston, Texas. She came from our area here of East Tennessee. She lived down in Loudon, Tennessee, and I live up in Knoxville, so she wasn't too far from us, but we were both chapter daughters of the General William Lenore chapter in Lenore City. And so she came into DAR through her mother, Venora Fry, and Venora had belonged to the Stone Corral chapter in Lyons, Kansas, which is close to where Shari grew up, which was in Little River, Kansas. I'm a Kansas girl, and there's several others in this group. So this is just fun to see a little bit more about our home state. When Shari retired, she followed her mom's footsteps, actually, in learning to do a little bit about her genealogy. And she also believed that her mother had always said that if one is to be a worthy citizen, it's necessary to be a contributing individual in the area to which one lives. And so she did. She jumped into DAR, was a wonderful person just to get to meet, but she was so active in our chapter. And I'm happy for her that she's moved to Texas. And when she does transition to a chapter there, she will be dynamite. Shari went to Kansas State University and graduated in 1969. And that's where she met her husband, Steve. And they've been married for 54 years in April. And then her degree was in biological sciences and education. And she taught science for 4 years in a middle school, but realized that she wanted to pursue a career in the medical pathology lab field. So she registered as a histotechnologist, and she worked for over 30 years in hospitals and private laboratories and helped provide patients with diagnostic results. She spent 15 years at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and advanced to technical coordinator of anatomic pathology. And she and Steve have 2 daughters. One's in Boston, Massachusetts, and one's in Houston, Texas, with a total of 5 grandchildren, and both daughters are physical therapists. Her hobbies during retirement include cooking. When she was here in Tennessee, it was boating on the Tennessee River, but I guess down there it'll have to be with lakes and things. But she travels, she quilts, and does an amazing job at quilting. She created a quilt of valor for her sister's husband, who served his career in the Army as a helicopter pilot in Iraq and Desert Storm. And she's planning to start a second Quilt of Valor quilt for a neighbor's son who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as a career serviceman. She volunteered with Village Quilters Guild in the community service workshops, and she was also chair of children's ministries at the community church in Tellico Village, where she also taught Sunday school to children and youth. She's helped at her church with monthly lunches for disabled adults with adult community training. And because her husband was a regular volunteer with building and rehabbing homes for Habitat for Humanity, she supported that cause also by volunteering as a cashier at the Habitat store in Lenore City. And that helped provide funds to build homes for low-income families. And then she contributed to our chapter, the General William Lenore chapter in DAR, as a junior membership chair, and to projects like helping the wall that heals, and was personally had the opportunity to assist families and friends of Vietnam veterans to locate their loved ones on that wall. And she's very active with our chapter. Without further ado, I will pass it on to Shari, and hang tight. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we will.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. We're ready, Shari.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited today to be with all of you and to get to know you. And I just would like to say that I'm a Kansas farmer's daughter who is really pleased and honored to be able to share the history of the Santa Fe Trail and also about my connection with my Phi family in Rice County, Kansas, as she had mentioned. And so this presentation really came from the fact that I was in the DAR in Tennessee, and in 2020, they chose as the commemorative event for the year, they chose the Santa Fe Trail. And so I thought, oh, I'm from Kansas and I lived on the Santa Fe Trail. Maybe I should give this speech or give this presentation. So it just happens that my mother in 1996, who belonged to, like she said, a DAR chapter in Lyons, Kansas, gave this a similar presentation to her chapter. And so I found her presentation in all of her speeches she had given through the years. And I thought, oh, let's just work on this and embellish it. And we're going to present this. And I was excited. And Renee thought, well, that's perfect. I think we can use this presentation. So we go from there. And I will start by saying that she was a teacher, and you can go to the next slide. And you will see that this is a handout. She was a teacher in Little River, Kansas. I actually attended some of her classes in home economics and psychology. And she actually, before we used PowerPoints, this is something she would do, hand out them handouts in the classroom. And so I'm going to be using these images today to share with you the story of our family and how we connected to the Santa Fe Trail. So let's start with the first image, and you can see this is probably an image that would have been seen by my family as they migrated here. And let me tell you just a brief, this is really a picture of a short grass. It's called the Kansas shortgrass prairie. So you can see it doesn't get very high, and like the Flint Hills that have the tall grass prairies. So I would like to share with you just briefly that my family migrated from, they settled in Pennsylvania. They're German heritage, and they settled in Pennsylvania, but then they migrated to Indiana, Kentucky, and finally Kansas, where my great-grandfather, Frank A. Fry, purchased land in 1885. So this, like I said, is an image of probably what they would have seen in their pastures and in some of the land in that area. At that time in 1885, the trail was no longer used because railroads had been built. And so they were used for transportation instead of the using the trail like they had done for almost 60 years. So the other interesting thing about my grandfather, he named his homestead the Stone Corral Ranch, which you're going to find out our family is so entwined with Stone Corral and that image. So let's go to the next one. And this is a plat map that shows how where and located where you are in Rockville Township. And if you'll look and look in the middle on, and it also helps to, yes, we're pointing at the little center number 22, and it is the section, and those sections were 1 mile square. So 1 mile on each side. So that gives you an idea of how big a section would be. And you'll see that the yellow line goes through, that's the Santa Fe Trail, where it went through my family's farm. And in section 22, you'll see the letters LF, and that stands for Leroy Fry, who was my father. And so that's where my farm is, right where those letters are. And it's not, and then up on the upper right corner, you will notice the Little Arkansas River runs through the Santa Fe Trail in section 13. And there's two of the sites there that I will be sharing with you. And the first one is the Stone Corral Fort on A. And it was across the river there, right near the river, where they were going to ford the rivers, and we'll hear about that. And the other one is B, and that is the 240-year-old marker tree that guided the travelers as they came through the trail and tried to cross. They would have to cross the river at this point. So these locations were only about 3 miles from me, and I'm going to share you those stories about that. But first, I think it'd be interesting. This is the photo that came out of one of the books that my mother had, and it's the entire Santa Fe route from Missouri to New Mexico. And so if you kind of think with me, we're going to get a little bit of a history of the Santa Fe Trail by looking at this map. So first of all, remember that buffalo blazed these earliest trails in Kansas, and Indians took advantage of them, those trails. And when the early explorers appeared, they used the same routes. So the tracks got worn deeper and wider as the trappers, explorers on foot, soldiers on horseback, and merchants and home seekers in covered wagons used these trails. So in 1821, Captain William Becknell, who was a merchant, and he was bankrupt at this time, decided that he needed to do something. And he took a pack mule of goods from Old Franklin, which you'll see at the very corner on the top right, all the way down to New Mexico. And that was Santa Fe, New Mexico. And at that time, this was still Mexican territory before the Mexican War of 1846. So in his wagon, the covered wagon that he was using, or the pack mule train, it included, he would trade things with like calico and printed cloth for very high prices for silver. And he'd also would sell or trade mules and horses with the American Indians. So this route that you see became the Santa Fe Trail. Then other merchants soon expanded this lucrative business, and they found out about it and decided they should get in on what was happening. And this trade ballooned to $1 million a year business. So later goods were transported in freight so they could get more goods across and make this trail road that they took all the way across the United States, or this middle part of the United States. And they were pulled by horse, or sometimes mules, and sometimes oxen. And the other thing that was interesting is that in 1825, Congress decided that they better authorize a survey and mark this trail. So they used stone or earth mounds. And so those are located along the route, or were at that time. The trail is approximately 900 miles long, and it passed through portions of Missouri. You'll see Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and New Mexico. And over 2/3 of that is in Kansas. So when they started making these trips, this was not an overnight trip like we could do in our car. It took 8 to 10 weeks to travel by a wagon train, and they would only travel about 10 to 15 miles per day. The trail was used from 1821 to 1880, which was 60 years, and it really played a critical role in the commerce of the United States until the railroads were built. So after the first about 25 years, more forts were added along the routes to guard against the Indian attacks. Stagecoach lines were carrying mail, and inns were seen along the trail. And they say that historians note there's probably more than 130 trail-related sites in Kansas itself on this portion of the Santa Fe Trail that included segments of the trail ruts, campgrounds, forts, trading posts, burials, and battle sites. So there's a lot to see if you want to see this, take this trip through Kansas. The next photo was a pen and ink sketch of Stone Corral Fort. And this showed up in a paper, it was in a newspaper, and this kind of, it shows you what it looked like. And it's located about 3 miles from my farm, as I mentioned earlier in that plat map. This site was built in 1850 on the west bank of the Little Arkansas River, which I showed you on the plat map also. And it was a fort that was made from hand-laid stone from a nearby limestone outcropping. It was 200 feet wide by 400 feet long, with walls that were 8 feet high and 30 inches thick. And it was really a safe haven for military and travelers with their livestock and their covered wagons. And they did have to pay a fee to stay in these protective walls. So some nights there would be inside of this between 8 to 30 wagons camping inside this enclosure. The wagons had crossed the Little Arkansas River near the Stone Corral Ford. And since it was the easiest place to ford the river with its very steep banks. Many times it took numerous yokes of oxen to pull these heavily loaded wagons across this river. And there was a section, there was another very inventive man that decided he would build a toll bridge, and then he charged 75 cents to get across that toll bridge. So most of them chose the more inexpensive free route and to get across the river. So this is kind of a help you to see what it looked like. Now this next photo, I talked about a marker tree. And this is a photo that shows my mother that's down in the bottom in the little, see the little yellow highlighted person down below. And it could be seen, it was so large, it could be seen, it was a cottonwood tree, and it could be seen far out on the plains. And it guided these travelers to the Little Arkansas crossing. And this tree was over 240 years old at the time my mother gave her presentation in 1996. She was, like I said, it shows how tiny she is against this giant tree. And the tree, unfortunately, is no longer standing due to weather and to age. All right, let's go on to the next image. And this is the oval Santa Fe sign that was used, and you'll hear how those were used as signs to mark the trail in later years. And I want to share a description of a day. While you're looking at this, I want to share what a man named Lindell, who lived near this site, near the Arkansas River crossing and the Stone Corral, and what he published many articles about the Santa Fe Trail. So let's take you back in time. You're gonna all have to feel like, let your imagination carry you back to 1850 as the wagon caravans approach this Little Arkansas River at Stone Corral from the east. At times there would be 4 or 5 wagons traveling side by side like this one you see across the Kansas Prairie. And you can hear the rumble and the roar, and interspersed with sharp cracks of bullwhips and loud yells. And the prairie schooners, as they call them, if you can look at them, and they look almost like a ship. And they called them that because as they were going across the Kansas Prairie, it was like they were floating along on the trails. And each were drawn by 6 to 12 yoke of oxen or mule. And they always had a lead. You can see this person that's using his whip, leading. He was called a wagon master. He halts the caravan on the east side of the river. And the banks, like I said, are steep and muddy. And the wagons are heavy, and the mules are pretty tired at this point. Each wagon is dragged up the steep bank to the high ground on the west side. And then when they have finally crossed over the river and forded it, they are unhooked, and they are watered and taken out to off the trail where the grass is good, and they can enjoy a little break from their hard work. And the herders guard them as they graze, because there's always that chance that Indians are going to come along, and they would have to put them in a wagon corral. So at night, just think about, they have to stop, campfires were built, and suppers cooked, and perhaps buffalo or antelope steak if the hunters are lucky, and maybe coffee. Of course, they would have black coffee and bread made in a Dutch oven, and that's about all. Beds were made under the stars and often under the wagons. And that while they were all sleeping, all the people were sleeping, or the men in these trails, these that are taking the wagons along. They guarded these stations, and they had to take intervals during the night to make sure that the Indians or whoever would bother their men at night. But only the ill were exempt from this duty. So just think about it. Comes the dawn, before that's, you know, they want, before almost the first streak of light, they would have these mules already yoked and hitched to their loads and ready to take off. And it's summer, so they want to go out when it's cooler and make that first 6 to 8 miles that they're going to travel, and then stop and corral again and eat breakfast. And during the hot heat of the day, these mules were let out to graze, and then they would start back up and hitch them back up. And about 3 o'clock, when it started cooling down a little, they would travel 6 to 8 more miles before they corralled for the night. And so this scene was reenacted over and over on the way from Missouri to New Mexico and back again. All right, the next photo is a book called Following the Santa Fe Trail, a guide for modern travelers. So much of the excitement in following the Santa Fe Trail is coming to see actual physical remains like ruts, old forts, or period artifacts that are preserved in some of the museums in Kansas. And I suggest this book or one like it if you plan to visit anytime and take this Santa Fe Trail. Over the years, my grandfather and my father recovered numerous artifacts with their tillage equipment. When they'd be plowing the land, they would find things like harnesses. And they even found a grist mill stone that was probably left on the side of the trail because it either was too heavy or what, we don't know what the reason was, but it ended up in our yard. By contrast, markers and monuments represent recent additions to the trail that started being installed in the 20th century. So the DAR got involved and launched the earliest and still most ambitious effort to commemorate the old Santa Fe Trail. So between 1902 and 1919, DA chapters in all the trail states, except Oklahoma, relocated these fading trail routes. They raised funds and they saw to the placement of handsome incised granite markers. And you're going to see the very first one here was put out in 1906. And this one is actually right on the road beside my great-grandfather's pasture, and where you would be able to see ruts today if you made the trip to Kansas. And so you can see these are really kind of rough stone. They look like a gravestone, but they really are more of a rough shaped, especially if you see this one. And I have to give credit to a friend, a childhood friend and a neighbor who lives in the area, Ed Hodson, who now farms my family's land. He took pictures of these, and so I could share them in my presentation. So the last one is, the last photo is a picture of the Little Arkansas crossing, or the stone that has that incised, and the Stone Corral site, that are all really within, like I said, about 3 miles from my home. This brown tourist sign was added later, and it locates these two sites. And this would have been, if you think, if you look at it, not far behind through the field and through the woods there, you would be able to find that Stone Corral site and the Little Arkansas crossing. So in 1948, you can go to the next slide. This is the same one I used for the story of the trail. In 1948, the American Pioneer Trail Association marked the route between Missouri and New Mexico with appropriate signs, and these were erected in places all along the trail and throughout the whole route. They were originally they were metal oval signs with a white background, and they were produced by the Independence Stove and Furnace Company in Independence, Missouri. They showed a teamster with a mule-drawn freight wagon, and on the words, of course, Santa Fe Trail. So these markers were placed with appropriate ceremony on or by the schoolhouses all along the entire route. And they put one in front of the school that I went to in my childhood. I went to the Rockville School. I attended it in the 1950s, and it was a it was a modern school, but it just had 2 classrooms. So we had grades 1 through 4 in one, and then the 5th through the 8th in the second. And I went to grade school there my entire, until I went to high school. And that was only just a quarter of a mile from where I lived. And this sign then eventually that was at the school was moved back to my farm, and now sits beside the driveway of where my home is, and my Fry family home in the driveway. So it's very special that I have a reproduction of that. And you can see it behind. I have it on the mantle behind me. It was a reproduction made of the original sign that was put in our yard. And it was done by Ed Hodson again, who decided that those of us that lived on the trail or near it he had those made for me and several other people that lived in the area. So that's a very special thing for me to have as my artifact from the Santa Fe Trail. So the next one photo is a original watercolor painting of the Stone Corral School. Now this was painted by a friend in high school. She was a girl that became a wonderful watercolor artist. And she painted this, as she did many things from Kansas, elevators and wheat fields. And she just was a wonderful artist. And so she gave me this picture, and it shows the school that was stood there for years, and the stones that were used in it, even though they're covered up with plaster, you can see the siding looks smooth, but underneath that are stones that actually came from the Stone Corral Fort. So let me share something that my mother wrote, and she wrote a little bit about the history of the Stone Corral, and I will quote her what she said. My mother said, "I feel so fortunate to live in such a historic spot where the history was made." And I do feel the same way, that I didn't probably appreciate it, but I do now as I am more interested in history. She said, "I want to share what happened to some of the stones that they used at the Stone Corral Fort. Stones have no history. People do, but they forget and they die. Stones endure, but can't tell us anything. If they could, if only they could." In the 1880s, if you'll look out across Kansas, there weren't very many trees, and so they didn't have a lot of good plain lumber to use. So when they came time to build a schoolhouse for my Fry families that lived in that area, the handiest building material was contained in a massive structure called the Stone Corral Fort. And by that time, and this was only the site that they chose to put the school on, was only about 1.5 miles from the Stone Corral Fort. So since the trail at that time, the Santa Fe Trail was being abandoned, the residents decided, hey, there's a whole lot of stone that can be used for other things. And they hauled all of it off. And there is no trace of any of the stones. But these stones went in to building this Stone Corral School that was built in 1878. And it was a one-room school that functioned for 67 years. It was attended by my grandfather and my father, who rode his pony to school every day. Stone Corral School still stands today, but has been abandoned. But it is a reminder of the history of the Santa Fe Trail. My mother's Stone Corral DAR chapter helped to preserve it the structure during her lifetime. And you can see it's had some problems since then, but it still stands. And it is really, now you can see why when I said Stone Corral, it really was entwined with my family and my also the history of the Stone Corral. All right, the next photo is an aerial view of my farm in Kansas that was taken in 1986. This photo shows the pasture, mostly a little bit below the line in the middle on the left. And then above the line is the cultivated land. And this is really showing where the Santa Fe, this little tape line that I put on this photo or this painting, was right through that. You can tell then where it went through our land. My farmstead is sitting in the front. And if you'll look back, you can also see at the bottom the farm equipment used in harvest, which was a farm, our combine and the farm truck that was used to haul the wheat to the grain elevator. And just to throw in a little fun thing, when I was in high school, I worked at the grain elevator. So I got to help test the wheat for moisture as the loads came into the elevator. And some of the farmers would use the trick of putting all the green wheat in the back of the, where we couldn't put our spear to get the sample, just to see if they could get it in and sneak it in where it would cost them more if they didn't have the ripened wheat. But this above it, the line, you'll see they're actually in the middle of harvest. Part of it is being harvested and part of it is still there to be harvested. So if you look behind me on my mantle again, there is a vase of dried wheat that I actually gathered during harvest in the 1980s. And I've carried that around and moved it with me for about 40 years. So in closing, I'd like to share one more photo. And this is a photo, a silhouette of a Conestoga wagon pulled by oxen, which was made of laser cut metal and erected by some of my Fry relatives in 2006. It is located in the pasture of my great-grandfather, Frank Fry, where our Fry family connection to the Santa Fe Trail actually began. And it's also right in front of that would be, because this was up on a little hill where they went ahead and installed this. And right below that would be trail ruts that you can still clearly see today. And that's one of those exciting artifacts or something that you would go out and want to look at if you ever traveled into that area. So at this time, this completes my my presentation. And I just want to thank the National Society of Descendants of American Farmers for this opportunity to again share my Fry family story as it connects to the Santa Fe Trail. And I'd like to thank Renee Hamilton, our past regent from the General William Lenore Chapter NSDAR in Lenore City, Tennessee, who created this PowerPoint from my photos that I had for this presentation. I would like to also thank several of my Tennessee DAR sisters that are attending this today. And I'm very happy that I don't know if you're going to point them out or not, but anyway, and I'm just glad to have them get to listen to this presentation again. So one more thank you goes to Janice Sue Regal and Davina Lippman for their help in preparing for this day, and also for the work the Society does in recognizing and honoring farmers, awarding these scholarships to students going into this field of agriculture and educating us about the history of farming and helping search for farming ancestors. And so they do so much. I know you know that, much more than I've even listed here. But what I'd like to do now is open this to comments or to questions, if I can answer them. And I would like to say that prior to this presentation today, while we were working on preparing this presentation, Davina Littman asked a question. And so I'm going to let hers be the first question. She asked, how many traveled on the Santa Fe Trail? Well, I had to do a little research to find that out. And I didn't find about the whole number of people that travel back and forth through the years. But from 1825 to 1860, in the first 40 years of transportation by wagon, started by this Becknell, there were 9,084 men employed. There were 3,033 wagons. There were 27,920 oxen used, and a total of 16,439,000 pounds carried over the Santa Fe Trail. And this is really just a small part of the story of those who traveled. But I thought that was fascinating, and you might enjoy knowing those numbers. So again, I want to thank you for your attention and for having me come on today to share my story. And I just really appreciate that we do honor farmers, because in my heart, I'm always going to be a farm girl from Kansas. So thank you all. And I open it up to whatever questions you may have. And thank you for all coming today.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
I have a hand up here, Shari. Shari Graham is what I see.
This is Kansas Sweet, clear out here in California.
Oh,
And I
beautiful.
picked one
Oh.
vacation when I was back there with both my father's family, my mother's family, and now our daughter lives there. So this is something I keep on my shelf to remember me of the amber waves of grain that we
Yeah.
hear about in those songs. So
Good
that-
for you. It's beautiful.
Thank you, ladies.
excellent. Thank you, Shari. Any other questions or comments? Well,
For presentation, thank you.
Elaine Powell.
Yes, I'd just like to know if Shari is a descendant of Heinrich Fry of Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know, but that sounds like it could be.
Okay, he's from the 1600s. I didn't,
Okay.
I
need
know
to
I
write-
have, I know
I
I
need
have
to
Fry
write that down.
cousins in Kansas, and I wasn't sure.
So are you from Kansas? What was the name of this Fry? What was his name?
Heinrich Fry.
Heinrich. Oh,
Yeah, he came into New York in 1685 and then quickly went to Pennsylvania.
okay.
And there's a Heinrich Fry Family Association. So just thought I'd ask.
Oh, there's another association just for that. Wow.
Yes, yes.
I
Thank
have some
you.
work to do, don't I?
Yes. Julie Barnes.
I just wondered if you have any idea how many people stop to see the ruts or to see the stones on a yearly basis? Or do you have a sign-in sheet? Or is it just along the
It's-
trail and hopefully people get to see it all?
Right. I think that it's just come by. There's no place to sign in. There's this, the stone is there designating it as a trail. And I think that image in the background is certainly, and hopefully if you ever make a trip to Kansas, you should stop at the farm yard of some of the people that live there. And they can tell you, actually Ed Hodson, who lives about another 5 miles from there, would be a great source for you. He would take you and show you what it looks like. But it's really open. I think you could just walk in and walk up and see those trails. You might not have known that the trail ruts still are shown, but they are. And you kind of see them better in the wintertime when the grass isn't kind of, it's died back a little bit, but they are there. And what I guess amazes me is that they're there still. And the fact that there were so many, there are more than just one trail. I mean, they had to move their wagons over when they got so deep that they were rubbing up against the bottom of their wagons. So they'd move over because they didn't have a paved highway here. So, so there's several across that prairie, and that never was tilled. That pasture was never tilled. So it is what it's like from when the trail was there, and that's really exciting. So.
Thank you.
Bev,
Yes, Sherry, loved your presentation. I
Thank
was
you.
wondering where the trails go across the farm grounds. Are those trails protected by something like a land grant preservation or land preservation grant or under the National Historic, or do just the farmers and ranchers kind of look after it themselves?
It's just been in the farmer's hands, I think, the whole time. I don't think there's any organization that came out and said, you know, we're not going to ever till this up. Hopefully, as history goes on or as time goes on, they will still recognize. I think with that image of that Conestoga wagon out there, that's kind of putting a monument there. So that's going to help, having those monuments that the DAR put out. And then with what they did, I thought that was amazing when I heard about this image that was put out there, and it's pretty spectacular when you drive by the road and you look up there. It's almost like, whoa, they're traveling along right now across the prairie. So it's just a very unique setting for me to have been lived there and knew about it. And it kind of came through the corner of our pasture and went into, and that's why it went through some of our tillage land. So that's why when they would be plowing or tilling or whatever, they would dig up these parts and pieces that were left on the trail. So that's kind of how you get artifacts. And some of those were turned in. Lyons, Kansas has a wonderful museum that has a lot about the Santa Fe Trail. So that would be another place to visit. So they have their own little historical society, and some things have been turned in there that are related. So that's so any of the farmers along those roads, and this is just a sand road out there. It's not been paved or anything. So it's in Kansas, and that's where you want to go if you want to see some things like this, that is still there.
Thank you for being good stewards of that. And helping to preserve that all these years.
Thank you, Shari. And Renee, I want to thank you again for bringing this to our attention. As Davina and I are both Kansans, it was near and dear to our hearts to work with Shari and you. I would like to find out the three who said they were guests. Would you please raise your electronic hands? We would like to know where you reside. And we want to thank you again for coming. Donna, where do you live? You're muted.
Unmute.
I am a General William Lenore, daughter of the American Revolution, along with Renee and formerly Shari before she moved away from us. Sad. So I am living in East Tennessee. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I have some farmers back there, but I haven't gotten to that yet.
Right.
Take your time. Thank you, Donna.
Hi,
Thank you
Donna.
again for coming. Patricia, please unmute, and Darcy, would you unmute? Patricia, where are you from,
I'm
please?
from Kansas.
Oh, Kansas.
Oh my goodness.
Good.
Which one is that,
I'm a-
Patricia?
Yeah, I'm a fifth generation Kansas. My great grandparents came in 1856 and 1859, so I'm fifth generation Kansan.
Wonderful.
Where do you live, Patricia? Where was your farm?
It was in Waubonsee County.
Okay.
And
we
you
still,
currently reside where?
I live in Topeka, Kansas, and we still own the farm out in Waubonsee County, though.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Our relatives were from Weir City, Cherokee County, and then we resided in Wichita.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Darcy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm in Colorado.
You are, okay.
And I'm a member of the Smoky Hill Trail chapter of DAR.
Good,
Excellent.
So an
Is-
offshoot of Santa Fe.
good.
Darcy, was that in Kansas that you belong to that
No,
organization?
no, that's here in Colorado.
And Darcy, how did you hear about us?
I know a couple of your members. I'm a descendant of a whole bunch of farmers. My
Good,
family
And-
came across the Oregon Trail.
This is
marvelous.
Lori. I'm an associate member of the Smoky Hill Trail, and that's how I know Darcy.
Nice.
And happy birthday, Lori.
Good.
Oh,
And happy
thank you
birthday,
so
Lori.
much. Thank you, guys. That's so sweet.
Happy birthday,
Mhm.
Lori.
Thanks.
Well, if you are a first-time NSDOAF attendee, just raise your electronic hand. If this is the first time you've ever been on a Zoom with us,
Me.
oh my goodness, Helena, Donna, how nice. This
Good.
is good. Good, welcome.
Fun,
Welcome.
fun.
We have 5 of you. So that's nice. If you are a national officer of another organization, please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you.
Not a national, not a national.
Helen Werner, raise your hand. Charlie? Charlie?
And dealing with a cat. Hi,
Okay, and Charlie, yes, please tell us who you're with.
I am the first Vice President General of the National Humanist Society.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome. And Charlie?
I'm the genealogist general for Order of First Families of Connecticut, the Plymouth Hereditary Society, and the Registrar National for Descendants of Stephen F. Austin sold 300.
Thank you. Thank you. Lori Ramus?
I am the national officers of the National Society of Founders and Patriots of America.
Thank you, Lori. Welcome.
Mhm.
Sandy Esty?
Yes, I'm the National Treasurer for the Dutch Colonial Society and also the National Treasurer for the First Families of Maine, the Order of First Families of Maine. And I'm just president of the Founders and Patriots of America for the DC chapter.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Betsy?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'm the National Registrar for Daughters of the American Colonists, and I'm the historian for Continental Society of Indian Wars.
Thank you, Betsy. Margot?
Yes, I am the Deputy Registrar for the National Society Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage.
Thank you, Margot. Sandy Bassett?
Thank you. I'm third Vice President General of Colonial Dames 17th Century.
Thank you. And you're an officer for farmers also.
Yes.
Helen Werner?
Good afternoon, Helen Werner, Governor General, Continental Society, Daughters of Indian Wars.
Thank you. Suzanne Anderson?
Okay, there we go. Suzanne Anderson. I'm the state president of the USD 1812 in Wyoming, and also chapter region in Cheyenne, Wyoming for
Thank you.
DAR.
Thank you, Suzanne. Patricia Everts? Trish?
I'm the corresponding secretary for Colonial Daughters 17th Century.
Thank you. Sue
Thank you.
Petrus? Thank you. Sue Petrus?
I am the first Vice President General of National Society Daughters of the Union, 1861, 1865.
Thank you so much. Mary Beth Groves?
I'm Alaska State Regent for the state of Alaska.
Thank you, Mary Beth. The reason that I try and do this every time is so that you see faces of other organizations, and now you have a contact. In case you would want to join those societies, you can always contact them. So my national officers for NSDOAF, please raise your electronic hand. And if you would like to bring greetings, you're welcome to. Okay, Bev, would you like to bring greetings?
Yes, greetings from Nebraska. I'm the Nebraska ambassador and the counselor national for the National Society Descendants of American Farmers.
Hooray,
Glad to have
hooray.
you here.
Thank you, thank you. Charlie.
I feel like I've already brought greetings. I'm the one of the Texas ambassadors and the director of Farmerettes. So.
Certainly are. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Our magnificent master of ceremony and others. Okay, Glenn.
Greetings, everyone. If you have youngsters who are youth members of the National Society of Descendants of American Farmers, I thank you for bringing them on board, and I send greetings to them. I am also, it wouldn't all fit on the bottom, but I'm also a National Youth Ambassador. If you have children who aren't members and they're yours, please have them join. And also greetings from very sunny California. And Madam President National, just after my toast, I have a public service message that I'd like to share with the
Yes.
membership. So
That would be
thank you.
kind. And Glenn, please put your other background on.
Oh, very well.
Thank you. Sandy Bassett.
Sandy Bassett, I'm Chaplain National, and it's an honor to be here today, and thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Davina Lippman.
Registrar National. And an extra special thank you to everyone who sent in supplements in the month of February. The whole month was my birthday month. It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you to all of those. I see Lori Faracchio Kenny is not able to bring greetings over the Zoom. However, she said, I am glad to be part of this amazing organization. So I thank you all for all the other national officers and ours for attending. I'm going to attempt to share my screen for 2 minutes, and we're going to see if this will work. This is, do you all see it?
Yes.
All right. Nancy Gilfillan, could you please tell them what I'm showing them?
Recently, I was asked to do an interview for the Ag Mag, which is a publication of the Shaw Media Company in Illinois that owns about 90 newspapers, and they put out this Slick magazine and also online I don't know how often, but they asked me if I would do an interview about farmers, and they ended up asking me via email 14 questions that were rather lengthy, and I answered their questions and they did all of the rest. And I love the article. It just came out and I'm really pleased with what we're seeing. But the graphics, the writing mostly is mine. I mean, he took everything that I said, but I think the graphics that they put with it are absolutely spectacular.
Yes.
And I mentioned our other Illinois ambassador, by the way, welcome from Illinois, Julie Barnes, and they went out and found her picture as well. And I thought that was fantastic.
You did really well. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yes, I'm very pleased. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you to each and every one of you. I'm going to turn it over to Glenn, and then Glenn, after he is finished, then Sandy Bassett, I'll come back to you, please.
We are ready?
Mhm.
Okay. On behalf of the officers and members and guests of the National Society Descendants of American Farmers, I want to thank Shari for sharing an intimate look at her family's relationship with the Santa Fe Trail. The efforts of the pioneers, merchants, and soldiers who traveled this vital route were instrumental in helping the United States become a vibrant, productive nation. Shari's family was privileged to bear witness to the brave men and women risking storms, rattlesnakes, and raids by Native Americans to ride or even walk the 900 miles of the trail. Please raise your glasses as we toast both those intrepid souls and Shari West for bringing us this fascinating personal tale of their fortitude. May Shari and her family enjoy continued good health and happiness. Cheers and Slava Ukraini.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
And while I have your attention, and on a related note, although obviously the actual fighting is occurring quite a distance from here, cybernetic warfare is just part of warfare now. Working in the utilities industry, I can tell you that striking at infrastructure, which is heavily electronically based now, is one of the prime targets, and my company has personally seen it before. There will personally, and we got an email on this just the other day. I'm sure that the battle is going on via electrons as we speak. It is possible that you could lose power for a few hours up to a few days due to cybernetic strikes on electric transmission. And without electricity, our civilization pretty much devolves to the 19th century, pretty much devolves to the Santa Fe Trail. So I want to encourage everyone to have a few days worth of easily prepared foods that don't necessarily require electricity. Maybe you have a little propane stove or a grill or something like that if the weather's nice where you are. And also keep the tanks in your cars at least half full, because gas pumps also work on electricity, and if they hit transmission, it's a wide scale outage, and gas stations won't work either, and you may need your cars to charge your phones or other devices. So just stay prepared and be prepared for, here in California, we're prepared for earthquakes, so we kind of have that stuff already, but it's not really a consideration for a lot of other places. So just be prepared for an outage of a few days. It could happen. And I see several hands that are up. I'm just going to go in order from left to right. So Suzanne Anderson. Oh, okay. And Bev, did you have your hand up for this, or you just have your hand up for, okay. Joe, yes.
Yeah, this is the time to make sure that you're updated on your backup programs. Make sure you're backed up on your software and your AVG and things like that, on your computer, things like that, that you're backed up to the cloud or whatever you're choosing to do. What Glenn is talking about is real serious stuff here. Your genealogy stuff is backed up. This is serious. So, thank you, Glenn, for the public service announcement. All of our files are important. And you've got a little bit of extra cash because the ATM machine will be down. So make sure you got the extra $20 in your back pocket.
No, just probably another 10, 15 minutes.
Charlene?
Glenn, additionally, where Glenn works in the utilities area, I worked for 25 years in healthcare. I will reiterate, keep a half a tank of gas.
I know there was one of them.
Fill bottles of water from the tap. Just keep it by your toilet. You may need them. And also print a copy of important medical information and put it by your keys to your car. Your allergies, your pertinent things that a doctor may need to know. Because God forbid, if you have to go to the emergency room while we are in an attack, a cyber attack, and this has happened before, they're not going to be able to access the records that we've become accustomed to already having. Allergies, medication, pertinent medical conditions. Just make a list of it and keep it by your keys in case, God forbid, you have to go to the hospital.
And that applies to your pets as well. Many of you may have older pets with various medical conditions, and you may need to take them for some reason. And if you can't remember, the vet doesn't have the records, so you don't want to get in that situation. So, pets are members of the family, and you need to be prepared to evacuate them or do whatever they need to do as well without electricity. Thank you.
Any other statements?
I would like to ask Glenn, being close to military bases, I'm now in the Pensacola area, Are we at more of a risk?
I think the cyber attacks are I would say more industry than, I mean, the military base definitely, but they have their own database. So I would not say just your proximity makes you puts you in danger from a more physical attack, but not necessarily any kind of cybernetic thing, or cyber electronic thing. So I would not be too concerned about that. I've also been handed a note. You can create a thumb drive with copies of all your important documents, insurance policies, and rabies certifications and identification, because even like the hospitals will have generators. So their computers will work. They just may not be able to access your records online. But to answer your question about Pensacola, just being there is your proximity to a military base doesn't necessarily increase your danger, unless they decided to take out the power to Western Florida, the entire panhandle, just to kind of affect the base. So better safe than sorry, but I would not say proximity to any particular base puts you in greater danger with that.
Well, she may be on a critical switch. That's something to find out from your area electric company. If you're very near a base or a hospital or things like that, it's what's called I think it's called a critical switch, where even if it does go out, it's usually the first in the infrastructure to come back up, because they're trying to support the local government or the local hospital, etc.
Right. These outages would be widespread, like regional.
Right.
And they would, once it comes back, they would do their best to bring back hospitals, fire stations, police stations, things of that nature, so that they can provide emergency services. But hopefully all of this is means nothing, and it won't make a difference. But I know we personally have been subjected to electronic attacks. Sometimes they're successful, and most times they're not, luckily, because we have 18-year-olds who have spent their entire lives online, and they know exactly how to fight this more than us old folks. So they're doing their thing. So just better be prepared, and then if you don't need it, then you don't need it.
Having lived on the San Andreas Fault for my entire life in California, we always had a well-stocked pantry. My kids used to laugh, but it's not funny.
No.
And so I always had up to 3 or 4 months. Here now, with living in hurricane country, we are stocked now because we have taken a look at what's going on in the future with, things getting to shelves. We are stocked for a year. So.
Yeah, I living on the Hayward Fault in Northern California. We have wheelie bins that, if our house is destroyed, they're outside, so we could just wheel them into the car, go to whichever emergency shelter is open, and we have everything we need. We don't even have to take anything from the house. So yeah, it's we're just be prepared. That's my big message, is be prepared, because we don't know what could happen.
Thank you.
Margot. Glenn, you have 5 hands up.
I do, yes. Just keep them coming.
Okay.
It wasn't my intention to take over the meeting.
Margot.
Yeah, just briefly, my question was very much in the same vein, because I live just a stone's throw. In fact, my daughter's house, I can walk into Washington, D.C., and we are always feeling like we're ground zero, and also right behind one of the Fort Detrick sites in Forest Glen. So yeah, I'm sure you don't have any more information than
Even if I did, I probably couldn't share it. So
yeah. So the answer is still just get prepared.
Yes.
Thank you.
In fact, living in earthquake country, I actually have a kit in my car that has water and snacks and a change of clothes and a flashlight. And so just because I could get caught between home and the office, which is only like 5 miles, but I might be driving somewhere else and a meeting for one of my other societies and just get caught out and need to supply myself for a day or two. So we both got things in our cars for that sort of contingency. So it may be a little alarmist, but better to have it and not need it.
Yes. Glenn, does our generator help if the grid goes out?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it will.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'll be self-sufficient until
until they cut off the gas supply lines.
Yeah. Now that we know that you have a generator, the people will be, your house will be assaulted by everyone who wants to charge their phones in your neighborhood.
Generator and solar panels here, so I'm double protected, but they can take out the natural gas lines.
Yeah, I think the natural gas pressure is supplied by electrical pumps. So electricity is everything, and once it goes down, there's really just you're back to the 19th century. You're back to just what you can do with what you've got. So, yes. Renee, did you have another question?
Sorry, I just wanted to unmute. When you were talking about for our pets, it made me think of this. We have an area here at our house that we kind of have done disaster planning for, but I thought y'all might take a look at this. This is just a backpack, okay? And it's a pet evac pack. You can get them very inexpensively. And that way, if, when you do have to grab and go, you can put your data and everything in there for your pets. And then you just have to grab the bag and go. And they're usually set up for like at least a 3-day. It has pet water, it has everything in it. But just something to think about if you're worried about your little fur babies.
Thanks, Renee. Betsy?
Thank you. My only comment was also in that list, make sure you have a hand can opener. Our power went out, which it does several times in the winter in Ohio, and my son and daughter-in-law had to come borrow my can opener.
I didn't know there was anything but hand can openers.
Yeah, most of them are electric.
Yeah,
I prefer the crank. Thank you. Well, let us, I'm going to say thank you so much to everyone for coming. Again, Renee and Shari, you've been a joy. It's good to see each and every one of you. Remember, we have 2 Zooms coming up. We have one, which is our 3rd birthday, 3 years. Please join us. Please, please. That will be such fun. Bring your snacks if you're not able to come here, but we welcome you to come to national headquarters, Davina's house. Davina will also be doing, Davina will be doing a Zoom for us in April. Davina, you want to tell them about, just real quick about the Zoom?
Celebrating Thomas Jefferson's birthday. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, that's special since he loved being a farmer.
So do register for that. We just put that up. Yep. We hope you join us for that. We have many things going on this summer, and we thank each and every one of you for your support for the National Society Descendants of American Farmers. We gave $58,000 total to 29 students since our inception. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot that you've given, and it's all because of you, each and every one of you. So with that, I'm going to tell you farmer smiles and farmer hugs to each of you. Thank you so much. If you want to stay on, you're more than welcome to. We'll chat for about another 10 minutes.
Davina or Genesu, did you want to take pictures?
I have been. But
Oh,
we'll,
wow.
we'll
Good.
do another one. If I've taken probably about 6 or 7.
Okay.
So hold
I
on.
sent you some too, so I've sent you some too.